Welcome back, guys. So we've already determined that there are many creatures in the animal world who can show cognition. Cognition is that process of knowing that includes awareness, reasoning, recollection, judgment. It seems like a skill that would only be reserved perhaps for humans or maybe at the most chimpanzees, advanced creatures like dolphins and things of that nature. But this cognition in various forms filters down to a fairly wide variety of creatures. We talked about the fact that honeybees can learn the difference between same and different, and then we were moving on to what we called problem solving. Problem solving is probably the most advanced form of learning and understanding that we could discuss in the animal kingdom. It's the process of devising a strategy to overcome an obstacle, to be put in a unique or new situation, and then to develop a solution to that situation. A great example is a classic example you can find information on the internet is putting a chimpanzee in a room. There's a banana tied up out of his reach, but there's numerous boxes and objects in the room, and it doesn't take long for the chimpanzee to take a look around, figure out what to do, take the boxes and objects, stack them up in a way that he can reach the suspended food. Chimpanzees are pretty darn good at that. They are pretty good problem solvers. Another good example is a raven or a crow. They can quickly learn to solve a number of puzzles to get at a food source or to get what they want. And we're not talking about training where you taught them and showed them how to do it. We're talking about a unique situation where you put them in a situation where they face something they have never seen before, and they learn the steps or the process to get around that situation or to achieve their goal. And again, there's this great YouTube video. I just mentioned the crow because most people are familiar with the fact that chimpanzees and a lot of the apes and primates in general are pretty intelligent and can problem solve, but even birds and other creatures, and these crows, these corvids, are great examples of this, and this one is a great video on YouTube if you want to check it out. So problem solving is coming up with a unique solution to a unique situation. Another great example is chimpanzees and other apes and other monkeys for that matter, who have learned to crack nuts using tools, things of that nature. I just watched on TV just the other day a great interview with Jane Goodall, who just turned 80 years old. Fascinating woman. Jane Goodall is the researcher who way back in the 60s and 70s was doing a lot of work with chimpanzees in Tanzania and parts of Africa, Gombe in Tanzania. And she was one of the first scientists to see and document the use of tools by these chimpanzees. And prior to that time, it was thought that no other creature on the planet except for humans created and made and used tools. And it was shown that chimpanzees use a wide variety of tools, and that was a big breakthrough. It was a big aha moment to realize that these creatures had the cognitive ability to do a wide variety of things. So there should be some videos there in the folder of a chimp cracking a nut, and some other videos you can find online as well. The development of learned behavior. So let's talk about how do these creatures gain these behaviors? How do these creatures come about to have some of these very learned and advanced behaviors? Development of some behaviors occur in pretty distinct stages. So just like in school, when you learn things, there's kind of a method or stages generally that you go through to learn things. Happens the same way in the animal kingdom. A good example, they talk about this white-crowned sparrow memorizes a song of its species early in its life during what we call a sensitive period, but doesn't attempt to sing it yet. And then the bird then learns to sing the song during a second learning phase later in life. So they did some experiments where they showed this particular little sparrow early in its life, during a very particular period of its life, it has to hear adults of its species singing the song. If it does not, it will never grow up to learn its song. So the first part of the phase, the first phase of the learning process, is for it to hear and memorize the song of the adults of its species. Now during that time period, it doesn't actually try to sing it or learn or try to imitate it. All it simply does is record, basically mentally record. Later on in its life, then it goes through a process of testing and learning and trying little bits of the song until it gets it right. And it's basically comparing what it's making, the sounds that it's making, to the recording in its brain, and it's trying to get the two to match. So this is a two-step process, and it's interesting that if he doesn't hear the adult singing the song properly during that sensitive period, he will never grow up to be able to sing the song himself, even though those are two separate stages of his life. Another good example in way that creatures learn pretty complex behaviors is through what we call social learning. Social learning is learning through the observation of others in your group, in your species, in your clan, and it forms the roots, the basis of what we would call culture. Culture is the passing on of information from one generation to the next, and we might think of human culture as being so distinct and different from the animal kingdom that you couldn't relate it. But there are portions of what we would consider culture in other animals as well, particularly the primates like chimpanzees, orangutans, gorillas, our closest living relatives. For example, young chimpanzees learn to crack palm nuts with stones by copying older chimpanzees. They could potentially learn this trial and error style, but it's more efficient for the chimpanzees as a species to pass this knowledge along. And so just like there are many things as a human you might kind of learn on your own, sort of accidentally, trial and error, and maybe some of us would learn it and some of us wouldn't, but it's far more efficient, and it's part of culture to pass on knowledge. And so we are not kind of repeating, stuck in this endless loop of everyone learning or rediscovering. We are adding to and passing on that knowledge. For example, vervet monkeys give and respond to distinct alarm calls for different predators. So they pass on this knowledge. These little monkeys have a number of enemies. They have leopards and snakes and eagles that they have to watch out for, and they have developed a communication system to where they have a different cry, a different alarm sound for the different creatures that might be attacking them. So they have a particular cry that's known as the leopard cry, and when the others hear this, they take off and climb up into the trees right away. So they kind of all go, oh crap, we hear the leopard cry, and they all take off and run up into the treetops. Now if they hear the eagle cry, they suddenly all stop what they're doing and look up toward the sky, because that is the cry that indicates danger from above. And if they hear the snake cry, it causes them to stand up tall on their hind legs and start searching the ground and looking around on the ground. So they have a language, and this is taught to the other vervet monkeys within the group. It's not trial and error. They pass on that information, and that's social learning. Great example here, some pictures. A young chimpanzee, you can see kind of the baby, the infant chimpanzee, and he is watching very carefully as the older chimpanzees basically teach him, show him how to crack open the nuts using two big rocks. And then here's those little vervet monkeys. The vervet monkeys have a language so precise that they learn, like for example the eagle. The young ones tend to shout the eagle cry whenever they see a big bird of any kind, but they slowly learn and they are taught by the other adults, and they begin to use the eagle cry only when specific types of birds are in the air, because not every buzzard or every big bird attacks them. There's only about 2 or 3 actual types of eagles that will attack them, and they train each other to spot those eagles and then only do the eagle cry when those particular birds are in the sky. That way they're not giving a bunch of false warnings when they just see a big buzzard up in the sky or something like that. That is social learning. They are teaching themselves, teaching their offspring, just like we teach kids the alphabet and their colors and shapes and how to tie their shoes. So we mentioned that social learning forms the roots of what we call culture. Culture is a system of information transfer through observation or teaching that influences the behavior of individuals in a population. Human culture is what we know and the information we pass on, and our mores and our thoughts and feelings and what we feel is right and wrong, and it gets into something as elaborate as religion and law and things of that nature. Now of course I wouldn't say that vervet monkeys have laws and religions and complex societal culture like we do, but they do have a version of that. They have a simplified version of that. And just like our culture can alter our behavior and influence the fitness of individuals, their culture can alter their behavior and their fitness as well. Changes in behavior that result from natural selection occur on a much longer time scale than does learning. And in this next concept, we're going to examine the relationship between particular behaviors and the process of selection related to survival and reproduction. So in the next section there, concept, we're going to look at behaviors that specifically relate to what we already mentioned were the two most important things: sex and food, survival and reproduction. And we're going to talk about how evolution and natural selection shapes those behaviors in the same way that it shapes the physiology and body physical structure of a living creature. So we'll take one more break and we'll come back for concept 51.3.